No one ever thinks it'll happen to them. You grow up believing in love, in loyalty, in the quiet promise of forever, spoken not always through words, but in the little things, the morning coffees, the shared glances, the way her hand would find yours under the dinner table, even years into the marriage. My name is Daniel. I'm just a man like many others, a man who once believed that the life he built was solid, safe, deserving of trust. But life doesn't care about what you deserve. I met Claire when we were both just kids, high school sweethearts, the type people envy. She had a laugh that could turn a bad day around in seconds, and eyes that looked at you like you were the only thing that mattered. She used to make me feel like I was enough, more than enough. We got married at 26, just when I landed a decent job at a local design firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. We bought a modest house, adopted a golden retriever named Toby, and 2 years later had our daughter, Ella. From the outside, everything looked perfect. But sometimes, the most perfect pictures hide the darkest cracks. Claire's best friend since college was a guy named Adam, and ironically, or maybe cruelly, he was also my best friend. We were close, the three of us. Too close, perhaps. He helped us move into our first house. He was the godfather to Ella. We even shared family holidays together. I trusted him with my life, with my family, and that was my first mistake. There wasn't a sudden moment of revelation. No lipstick on the collar. No messages on her phone. Nothing so cliché, just little things, subtle changes. Claire started smiling less when I walked into the room, and more when her phone buzzed. She'd laugh at jokes I hadn't heard, disappear for hours with vague excuses. She used to call me Love, then it became Dan, then just silence. And Adam. He became oddly distant too, always busy, couldn't make it to barbecues or game nights anymore. I told myself it was life, that we were all just growing, older, juggling more. But my gut knew something wasn't right. One night, I came home early from work. The house was quiet. Toby wasn't barking, which was strange. Claire had told me she was going out shopping, but her car was in the driveway. I called out, no answer. Then I heard it, a faint giggle, from the upstairs guest room. My heart dropped. I stood there, frozen, feeling like my skin was peeling off from the inside. I didn't go upstairs. I couldn't. Not that night. Instead, I walked outside, sat in my car, and stared at the empty street. My knuckles were white from gripping the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just waited. 27 minutes later, Adam walked out the front door. My front door. He looked around, like a thief, and when he didn't see my car, he ran across the lawn like some coward, jumping into his truck like he'd just robbed a bank. That night, Claire came to bed pretending nothing happened. She even asked me how my day went, smiled that tired smile of hers, the one I used to love. And I looked at her, knowing everything, but said nothing. Why? Because I wasn't ready. I needed to understand why, how, what I had done wrong, if it was something I missed, something I failed to be. You see, betrayal doesn't just break your heart, it dismantles your identity. In the days that followed, I watched everything more closely. Her eyes, her words, the way she touched her phone and tilted it away from me, the way she laughed at texts when she thought I wasn't watching. I wasn't paranoid. I was confirmed. And yet, I played along, cooked dinner, drove Ella to school, kissed Claire goodnight, even as my stomach twisted with every touch. You might think I was weak, that I should have confronted them, screamed, thrown things, but I didn't. Not because I was afraid, but because I respected myself too much to act like them. I was raised to believe that when someone disrespects you, you don't lower yourself to their level. You rise above it. So I waited. I planned. I collected moments, details, not just to expose them, but to understand the depth of what I was about to lose. And somewhere in that silence, I changed. I started working late. Not because I had to, but because I couldn't stand being home. I took on bigger projects, met new clients. I found a rhythm, a confidence I hadn't known I still had, the kind of focus that comes from heartbreak. I even met a woman named Julia, an interior consultant I was working with on a design build. She was smart, graceful, kind. Nothing romantic ever happened, at least not then. But talking to her reminded me of what it felt like to be seen again, genuinely seen. Meanwhile, Claire started to notice that I wasn't asking where she was going, that I wasn't checking my phone when she was late, that I was smiling again, but not at her, and slowly her facade began to crack. She became more attentive, asked about my day, tried to cook again, bought new dresses, but it wasn't love. No, it was fear. Fear that I was slipping away. Funny how the ones who hurt you are the ones terrified of being left. One evening, while we were putting Ella to bed, Claire looked at me and said, "I feel like I don't know you anymore." And I just smiled. "You will," I said softly. "Soon, because I had a plan, and it was almost ready." Claire started waking up earlier. She'd have breakfast ready before I even came downstairs, wearing that same nervous smile she used to wear when we first started dating, when she was trying to impress me. I remember watching her flip pancakes, one morning, her hands slightly trembling, and I wondered if the guilt had finally started to crawl beneath her skin. I didn't ask. I didn't confront her. I just said, "Thanks," and ate every bite in silence. You'd be surprised how loud silence can be when someone is desperate to be forgiven. She started calling me babe again, even touched my hand at dinner. Ella, of course, was thrilled to see her parents getting along. She didn't know the layers of silence beneath each conversation, or how many nights I stared at the ceiling long after Claire had drifted off beside me, her breathing soft, peaceful, while mine was ragged and clenched with restraint. One night, she came into my office at home and just stood there, quiet, fidgeting with her wedding ring. "I've been distracted lately," she said, avoiding my eyes. "I know I haven't been the best wife." I looked up, closed my laptop. "You've been busy," I replied, my voice even, almost gentle. She nodded, slowly, like she was waiting for me to say something more, like she wanted me to yell or accuse or give her a reason to release what she was holding inside. But I didn't. And that terrified her more than any argument ever could. Because when someone's wronged you, and you say nothing, it leaves them alone with their guilt. And guilt is a cruel companion. That's when she started slipping. Little things, at first. She began checking my phone when she thought I wasn't looking, snuck glances at my emails. One time, I left my laptop open, on the kitchen counter while I went to take a call outside. When I came back in, she was staring at it, her expression unreadable. "You working with someone named Julia?" she asked, too casually. I shrugged. "Yeah, she's a consultant on the Green project." "She's pretty," Claire added, almost like a question. I didn't respond, because I knew exactly what she was doing. The irony wasn't lost on me, how she was growing suspicious of me when it had been her betrayal that lit the first match. Guilt, again, it eats from the inside. But I was patient. I needed her to fall apart. Not out of vengeance, but because it was the only way she would truly face what she'd done. As long as she still had power, still believed she could control the narrative, she would never own the truth. And then, Adam came back, not in person, but through a message. I saw it late one night when Claire left her phone charging in the kitchen. She never used to do that, but lately her guard had begun to lower. Maybe she thought I'd already forgiven her, or worse, that I was too broken to care. The message wasn't long. "I miss you. I know things got messy, but I meant what I said. I'm here when you're ready. My chest tightened, not from pain, not anymore, from clarity. Because now, I had the last piece I needed. The next morning, Claire was humming while brushing Ella's hair, acting like the perfect wife, the perfect mother. And I stood there, coffee in hand, watching the scene play out like some surreal performance. She turned to me and smiled. We should take a trip. Just the three of us. Get away for a bit, I raised an eyebrow. Anywhere special. Maybe the lake house. Remember the one we went to before Ella was born? I nodded slowly. Yeah, I remember. She looked relieved, hopeful even. And for a second, I almost pitied her, because what she didn't know was that I had already spoken to Adam. Yes. 2 nights before that text came in, I had messaged him from an old number he didn't recognize, pretending to be Claire. We need to talk, in person, just us, he replied within 5 minutes. Desperation is always eager, so I invited him, told him where, told him when, and then I waited. That lake house trip. It wasn't about family, it was the setup, but I didn't let anything show. I laughed when she told me to pack warm clothes, helped Ella into the car, even held Claire's hand as we drove out of town. And every time she smiled at me, trying to rebuild what she had shattered, I smiled back. Not because I forgave her, but because I knew the reckoning had already begun. She just didn't know it, yet. That night, after Ella had gone to sleep in the upstairs bedroom, Claire poured us both glasses of wine and lit the fireplace. She sat close to me, curling her legs up on the couch, her head resting lightly on my shoulder. It almost felt real. Almost. Dan, she said softly. I know I haven't said it properly, but I'm sorry. I looked down at her, eyes calm. For what? She hesitated, then whispered. For everything. I didn't ask her to explain, didn't demand specifics. I just said, thank you. And we sat there, in silence, as the fire cracked and danced, and guilt draped itself over her like a second skin, because forgiveness, true forgiveness, only comes after truth. And we weren't there yet. But soon, very soon. It's strange how people only begin to notice your strength once they've underestimated you. Claire always knew I was calm, steady, dependable, the kind of man who didn't shout or slam doors. But what she didn't realize, what Adam never realized, is that still waters don't mean there's no storm beneath. After that weekend at the lake house, something shifted, not just in her, but in me. I had been a man waiting, enduring, but now I was moving, and I made sure she felt it. I started dressing differently, sharper, more intentional, started coming home later, sometimes after Ella was already in bed. And when Claire asked where I'd been, I just smiled and said, working. She knew I wasn't lying, but she also knew I wasn't telling her everything. That was the point. I wasn't cruel. I still helped with dinner, still laughed with Ella, but I was no longer within Claire's reach. She could see me, but not touch me, not truly. And for someone like her, who once had all of me, that distance burned worse than any anger ever could. One night, I came home and found her sitting on the couch in the dark, staring at nothing. The TV was on, but the volume was low, like she'd turned it on out of habit, not attention. I sat down beside her, loosened my tie, said nothing. After a long silence, she spoke. Are you seeing someone? I turned to her slowly. Why would you ask that? She didn't answer right away, just stared at the wine glass in her hand, the red reflecting off her tired eyes. You're different, she said quietly. You laugh more. You're lighter, like you've let go of something. I looked at her for a moment, then back at the blank TV screen. I guess I have. I murmured. Her throat tightened at my words. I could see it. How she blinked too, fast, swallowed too hard. She wanted to ask more, wanted me to deny it, to reassure her, but I didn't, because this wasn't about revenge. It was about letting her feel, inch by inch, what it means to be replaced without being told, forgotten without being shouted at, lost, without the closure she once denied me. The next day, I met Julia for lunch. Strictly business, but Claire didn't know that. She called while I was at the cafe and I didn't answer. I saw her name on the screen and simply flipped the phone over. I came home that evening to a table set for two. Candles, a homemade lasagna, her specialty. It smelled exactly like it did the night I proposed to her 7 years ago. Claire stood there in a soft blue dress, the one she used to wear when she wanted to feel beautiful, her hair done, eyes glassy. I thought we could talk, she said. I nodded, pulled out a chair, sat. She poured the wine in silence. The clink of glass against glass was the only sound between us for a while. Then she said it. I know I hurt you. I didn't look up, just waited. She continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I know you know about Adam. I could lie. I could pretend, but you're too smart for that. You've always been smarter than I gave you credit for. I met her eyes then, and she saw it, the weight of what she had broken. The man who used to adore her, now just studying her like a stranger. I want to fix this, she whispered. I want us back. A pause. You and me. For Ella. That was the moment I realized something important. She wasn't truly sorry. She was scared. Scared of losing comfort, of losing control, of the version of me that was no longer chasing her approval. I leaned back in my chair, took a sip of wine. Fix what? I asked quietly. Our marriage. I nodded slowly. And what about Adam? She flinched at his name. It was a mistake. Was it one night? I asked, already knowing the answer. No, she said, after a moment. But it didn't mean anything. I raised an eyebrow. More than once? And it didn't mean anything. She looked down, ashamed. But not because of what she'd done. Because she'd been caught. Because the man she'd betrayed wasn't falling apart like she expected. Do you love him? I asked. No, she said quickly. It wasn't love. I don't even know why. She stopped herself. It just happened. Ah, the classic phrase. It just happened. As if betrayal were some act of nature. Like rain or wind. As if her decisions had no weight. I stood up, walked to the window. The yard was quiet. Toby lay curled on the porch, eyes half closed. Peaceful, oblivious. I'm not angry anymore, Claire, I said, still facing the window. She looked up, startled. You're not? No, because I realized something. What's that? I turned to face her, my voice calm, almost kind. I didn't lose you, she frowned. You lost me, I continued. And one day, that truth is going to settle into your bones like winter. And you'll remember this moment, the night you asked for another chance, and I smiled at you, with nothing left in my heart. She stood frozen, tears welling up in her eyes. But I wasn't moved, because my tears had dried long ago. That night, I slept in the guest room. She didn't come after me. Or maybe she did, and stood outside the door, unsure of what to say. I'll never know. But what I do know is that the next morning she started watching me differently. Not like a wife watching her husband, but like a woman watching the ground slip beneath her feet. And I hadn't even delivered the first blow yet. Not really. That was still coming. There's a kind of silence that isn't peace. It's the silence that comes after truth hangs in the air, too heavy to ignore, too sharp to swallow. That was the kind of silence Claire and I lived in, day after day, after that night. She moved, like a woman balancing on glass, trying not to slip, trying to pretend it hadn't already shattered. But I wasn't pretending anymore. I was preparing. You see, the thing about betrayal is, it teaches you patience. Before, I was the kind of man who trusted easily, who believed that love meant transparency. But now, I had learned to watch, to listen, and most importantly, to plan. It started with small things. I called my lawyer, quietly, asked about custody, laws, property rights, financial separation. I didn't file anything yet, just gathered knowledge, like a man collecting tools for a project no one else knew existed. Then I met with Julia again, over coffee in a public space. We talked about our current project, but also about life. She listened in a way that Claire hadn't in years, attentive, not distracted, kind, not performative. At the end of our conversation, she smiled and said, "You seem lighter today," and maybe I was, because knowing you're no longer at someone's mercy, that changes you, gives you back a part of yourself. But while I was building, Claire was unraveling. She asked more questions. Who were you with? Why didn't you call? Is there someone else? Each time I answered calmly, with just enough warmth to confuse her, but not enough to comfort her. She started checking my laundry, sniffing my shirts. The irony didn't escape me. How the cheater had become the one consumed by suspicion. Then one evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I hosted a dinner party, just 6 people, a few colleagues, Julia included, and one old friend from my firm who'd recently gone through a rough divorce. His name was Brian. Good man, level-headed. He brought his new girlfriend, a sharp, soft-spoken woman, with eyes that didn't miss much. Claire was caught off guard by the whole thing. She dressed nicely, played the perfect hostess. But beneath her lipstick and pleasantries, I could see it. She was panicking. She watched me laugh too freely, watched Julia and I share a look over some dumb inside joke about renovation budgets, watched how I poured everyone's wine but didn't ask if she wanted more. After everyone left, she stood in the kitchen, arms folded. "You didn't tell me she was coming, Julia? You know who I mean." I rinsed a glass, set it on the rack. "She's my consultant. I invited my team. That includes her." Claire didn't respond, but her silence wasn't calm. It was vibrating. "You're punishing me," she said finally. I turned to her. "Am I?" She swallowed. "Dan, I told you I was sorry." "I remember. And you said you weren't angry." "I'm not." Her voice cracked slightly. "Then why are you doing this?" And there it was. The question. Why? Why wasn't I yelling, crying, leaving? Why was I simply existing beside her like someone she couldn't read anymore? I walked closer, stood in front of her, just far enough that she couldn't touch me unless I let her. "Claire," I said softly, "I forgave you." Her eyes widened slightly. "You did?" "Yes. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean we go back to what we were. It means I'm no longer carrying your sin. You are." She blinked, the weight of my words hitting her like quiet thunder. "You think I don't feel guilty?" she asked. "I know you do," I said. "But you don't feel guilty for loving someone else. You feel guilty because I didn't crumble, because I'm still here, and I'm not broken." Her bottom lip quivered, just slightly. But I didn't reach out, didn't comfort her, because I had something else to say. "I've been talking to Adam." That got her. Her back stiffened, her eyes locked on mine, wide and fearful. "What?" I nodded slowly. "He thinks you're planning to leave me for him." She shook her head instantly. No, Dan, that's not true. I haven't spoken to him in weeks." "That's what you told me," I said, voice even. But I saw the message. Her mouth opened, then closed. Words scrambled behind her lips but couldn't make it out. "He still thinks you'll come back," I continued. "And maybe you will. Maybe you won't. But either way, I needed him to think so. Why? She whispered. I stepped back, because I needed to know who I was really dealing with. Claire's face turned pale. She knew, right then, that she was no longer in control of this story. Not her lies, not her guilt, not her version of what came next. That weekend, I told her I needed a few days away. Business trip. She didn't ask details, just nodded, barely holding herself together. But I didn't go for business. I went to the lake house, alone. And while I was there, I made one final call. To someone neither Claire nor Adam expected to hear. From his wife. Yes, Adam's wife. Her name was Megan. We'd met a few times at mutual gatherings. I remembered her smile. Tight, polite, but never quite genuine. The kind of woman who knew more than she let on. She answered on the second ring. Hello? Megan. It's Daniel. You remember me? A pause. Then, of course, I think we need to talk. Silence again. And then very softly, yes, I think we do. Because now, it wasn't just about healing. It was about truth, about closure, and about delivering it with the same quiet weight they had once used to shatter my world. There are moments in life when everything stands still. Not because time has stopped, but because the people around you haven't realized yet that their world is about to change. That's what the dinner was for. It wasn't spontaneous. Nothing about it was. I picked the restaurant carefully, somewhere upscale but not too loud. A place Claire and I had been to once, on an anniversary long before things fell apart. I knew the lighting, the layout. I even knew where the private booths were and where you'd be most visible without being obvious. I told her it was a small celebration, just a few friends, no reason to worry. She dressed carefully, of course. I watched her in the mirror while she curled her hair, choosing earrings she hadn't worn in months. There was a hopefulness to her, a desperation in disguise. She thought this was a turning point. In a way, it was. Julia arrived first. Stunning, but not overdone. Professional. Polite. She greeted Claire with the kind of warmth that made it impossible to hate her, but just distant enough to stir discomfort. I watched, Claire's smile stiffen as Julia took the seat beside me and not across from me. Brian came next, then two others from the office. And finally, right on cue, Megan arrived, Adam's wife. Claire didn't recognize her at first. They hadn't spoken much in years, and Megan had changed, more confident, sharper around the edges. But the moment she introduced herself, Claire's face dropped. Megan extended a hand. Claire, right. So nice to finally sit down with you. Claire blinked. Yes, of course. You look different. Megan smiled, smooth and cold. So do you. We all sat, ordered wine, made small talk, and for the first half hour, everything felt normal. Until it didn't. It was Megan who started. So, Daniel, she said lightly, I've been meaning to thank you. Claire looked up. I smiled, sipping my drink. For what? For reaching out. For your honesty. It meant more than you know. Claire's fingers clenched slightly around her fork. Oh, she said, attempting a smile. Didn't know you two were talking. We weren't, Megan replied. Not until recently. But I'm glad we are now. It's funny how often the truth hides in plain sight. Claire's breath hitched. I didn't even have to look at her to feel it. I leaned back, calm as ever. Megan and I realized we had more in common than we thought. Yeah, Megan added. Same man, for starters. And there it was. Not shouted, not screamed, just laid, bare on the linen tablecloth like another appetizer. The table went silent. Julia looked down, gently adjusting her napkin. Brian cleared his throat awkwardly. The others pretended not to understand. But Claire, She knew exactly what was happening. I turned to her, my voice soft, almost kind. "I told you I forgave you," I said. "But I never promised to protect your secrets." Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. "Not there, not yet." "Dan, please, can we talk in front of everyone?" I asked, tilting my head. "Why not? After all, you weren't ashamed when you invited Adam into our bed behind my back." A gasp. Maybe from one of the co-workers. Maybe from her. I didn't care. She opened her mouth, but I kept going. Calm, even, never cruel. I was going to keep it between us. I really was. But then you lied. Again. And I thought, maybe it's time the people around us knew who they were, really. Dining with! She reached for my hand. I didn't move. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "I've said I'm sorry. I've been trying to fix this." "No," I said. "You've been trying to control this. You're not sorry about the affair. You're sorry that it didn't stay hidden." The wine in her glass trembled. Her eyes darted toward Megan, who was watching, unblinking. Julia, too, had grown still, her expression unreadable. I leaned forward slightly. "You remember the lake house," I said. "You thought that weekend was for us. But it was never about us." Claire shook her head. "What are you talking about?" "I invited Adam there," I said. "I wanted him to believe you were still his. Still planning to leave me. I needed to know if the two of you were done or just on pause." Her voice cracked. "You lied to me." I smiled faintly. "Didn't we build this whole thing on lies?" She was breaking now. Not with drama, but with something worse. Humiliation. The kind that doesn't scream, but settles deep into your bones. "I thought you loved me," she whispered. "I did," I said quietly. "But love isn't a blindfold. And mine's off now." She stood abruptly. The chair scraped back. The room had grown too still. Eyes were on us, some trying not to stare, others not bothering to look away. She looked at me, one last time, then turned and left. Megan gave a small nod. Julia reached out and gently touched my arm. No words were needed. Brian raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said softly, and I clinked mine against his. Because this wasn't the end. Not yet. But the first blow had landed, and they finally knew. I wasn't the man they thought I was. I wasn't weak. I wasn't broken. I was wide awake. They say people don't remember what you say. They remember how you made them feel. That dinner was only the beginning. The days after it were quiet. Too quiet. Claire barely spoke. She moved around the house like a ghost, present but fading. Ella asked once why Mommy looked so tired, and I just kissed her forehead and told her Mommy needed rest. But it wasn't exhaustion, it was collapse. Claire no longer held the reins of the life she once orchestrated. She didn't know who I spoke to during the day, didn't know if I was still with Julia or not, didn't know if Megan had told Adam, or if Adam had told the rest of their friend group, or his boss, or his family. That was the worst part for her, not knowing. But I knew, because the avalanche had already started. You see, Megan hadn't just agreed to meet me out of curiosity. She had been suspicious for a long time. Subtle changes in Adam's behavior, the same way I had noticed with Claire. Her gut told her something was wrong, but she hadn't had proof, not until I gave it to her. And Megan, she wasn't like me. She didn't wait in silence. She burned everything. 2 days after our dinner, Adam lost his job, not because of the affair, but because Megan sent proof of it to the firm's HR department. Emails, messages, screenshots. Enough to create a scandal, especially when your company's culture prides itself on integrity. Turns out, one of the senior partners was Megan's cousin. Small world. Claire found out the same way I did, from her phone, buzzing endlessly in the early morning. She came downstairs, pale and shaking, tossed the phone on the table. "You did this," I looked up from my coffee. "Did what?" She couldn't even say it. just stared at me, broken. All I did, I said slowly, was stop protecting you. She slumped into a chair. He's ruined. His wife left. His job, his reputation. It's all gone, I nodded. So is mine, remember? She didn't respond, because she couldn't. But this wasn't the twist. The twist came later, when I showed her the envelope. She was sitting on the porch, arms wrapped around herself, as if trying to stay warm despite the summer air. I walked out, handed her a plain, sealed envelope. "What's this?" she asked, not looking at me. "Something you should have known," I said. "Years ago." She hesitated, then opened it. Inside were documents, photocopies, reports, dates, a DNA test. At first she didn't understand. Her eyes scanned the paper, then stopped. Her face went white. "No," she whispered. "No, this isn't real." "It's very real," I said quietly. "I had it done 6 months ago, after I saw the way Ella's hair curls, just slightly differently, after I remembered the timelines, after the math stopped making sense." She shook her head. "Dan, please. You can't think I would lie about that. About her." But I didn't say anything. I just let her read. Let the numbers speak. Let the percentage scream the truth she never had the courage to tell. Ella wasn't mine, not biologically. And yet, she was still my daughter in every way that mattered. But Claire? She had taken something sacred, and she had built a lie around it. Let me raise her, love her, give her my name, my time, my whole heart, without ever telling me the truth. That was the real betrayal. Not the affair, not even Adam, but this. "You've had years to say something," I said. "You had 1,000 moments to come clean. You didn't." She looked up at me then, eyes wide, drowning. "I was scared," she breathed. "I didn't know how. And then it was too late. You loved her so much. I couldn't take that away. From you." "You didn't give me the choice," I said, my voice breaking for the first time. "You took away my right to know." Tears streamed down her face, real ones, not the kind she used to cover guilt, but the kind that came from something finally breaking open inside. But it was too late. I stood. "I'm not leaving Ella," I said. "She's my daughter. She always will be. I'll fight for her if I have to." Claire nodded, sobbing. I know. You never meant for me to find out," I finished. But I did. I walked back inside, leaving her there on the porch, crying into the hands that once built the lie she thought would never come to light. That night, I packed a bag. I kissed Ella goodnight, sat beside her a little longer than usual, ran my fingers through her soft hair. She looked up at me, sleepy-eyed. "Daddy." "Yes, baby. Is Mommy sad?" I swallowed. "A little." "Did she do something bad?" I paused, then kissed her forehead. "We all make mistakes," I whispered. "But we can choose to do better after." She nodded slowly. "Will you be here tomorrow?" "I'll always be here," I said, "even if I'm not in this house. Because some things are deeper than blood, and some truths, once uncovered, never go quiet again." The house was quieter after I left. Not because there was no sound, but because I had taken something with me when I walked out. The illusion. The version of me Claire thought would always be there. The one she could hurt, and I'd still stay. The one she thought was too kind, too loyal, too soft to ever leave. She was wrong. I didn't leave in anger. I didn't slam the door or burn the memories. I simply packed what was mine, kissed my daughter goodbye, and stepped into the life I should have claimed long ago. For a while, I rented a small apartment downtown. Nothing fancy, just quiet, clean, a place where my mind could breathe again. I saw Ella on weekends, picked her up from school on Thursdays. We had pancake Saturdays and movie nights with popcorn and too many blankets. She didn't ask much at first, just held onto my hand a little tighter, but slowly She began to smile more again. I never told her about the DNA test because biology doesn't define fatherhood. Love does, and I never stopped loving her. Claire tried for a while. She sent long messages, apologies wrapped in desperation, asked if we could try again, said she would go to counseling, said she would do anything to make it right. But you can't rebuild a home when the foundation was a lie, and I was no longer a man looking to rebuild what broke me. I was building something else now. One afternoon, she came to my apartment, unannounced. She looked small, not physically, but in spirit. She held a folder, papers I didn't need to ask about. I'm not going to fight you, she said softly, for custody or for anything else. I nodded. Thank you. She sat across from me, eyes red. You were always better than me, she whispered, and I never appreciated it. I thought, I don't know. I thought I could do better. That there was more out there, but it was never real. None of it was real. Her voice cracked. I lost everything. I looked at her for a long moment. No, I said quietly, you lost me. And sometimes, that's enough to feel like everything. She left without another word, and that was the last time she came to me with hope in her eyes. After that, we became polite strangers. Our conversations were brief, updates about Ella, school forms, schedules. She moved back with her parents for a while, and I heard whispers that Adam had moved out of state. His life, like hers, had unraveled far faster than mine ever did. But I didn't watch it with joy, only with clarity. Because when you betray something sacred, life has a way of holding up the mirror. Sooner or later, you see yourself the way others do. And sometimes that's the harshest punishment of all. As for me, I kept building. Julia and I stayed close. For months, it was just friendship. Deep, respectful, grounded in the quiet understanding that comes from shared pain. She never pushed, never pried, just showed up, like truth does, when you're finally ready to see it. One night, we were walking after dinner, and she slipped her hand into mine. No words, no explanation, just the kind of silence that feels like a beginning. And I didn't flinch, because for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of being hurt. I had already survived. The worst. Months passed, then a year. Ella grew taller, braver. She started calling Julia by name, then by nickname. Started asking if she could come with us more often. I never rushed it, never forced anything. But one evening, after a school play, Ella looked up at me and said, I like it when she comes. You smile more. And I realized then I was happy. Not loud, dramatic happiness, but the kind that sits quietly in your chest and says, you made it. Not because you escaped the pain, but because you walked through it, alone and with your head high. Claire never remarried. She dated a few people. Nothing stuck. I didn't ask, and she didn't offer. She stopped sending long messages, stopped calling on weekends. She faded, like smoke after a fire has already burned through the house. Sometimes I wonder if she ever sits alone and replays it all. The lies, the silence, the way she thought she had everything under control until the day she didn't. Maybe she does. Maybe she doesn't. But that's no longer my burden. What mattered is this. I didn't become bitter. I didn't become cruel. I didn't become what they expected. I became better. Because in the end, her betrayal didn't define me. My response did. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: strength isn't loud. It's not rage or revenge or destruction. Strength is choosing dignity when you've been stripped of it. It's walking away when you have every reason to stay and fight. It's telling the truth softly, clearly, and letting the weight of it do what anger never could. Claire paid a price, not just for cheating, but for believing that a man's silence is weakness. What she never realized is that silence, when held long enough, becomes power. And I held mine until the day it roared.